Now, welcome back. Now, Namibia is launching the Transport Registers and Information Platform System, known as TRIPS, and the Corridor Trip Monitoring System, CTMS, in Windhoek tomorrow. Now, TRIP is a gateway or switch that connects national transport information systems in order to improve information sharing and the authentication of transit documents, licenses, permits, and vehicles and drivers' details between and among the tripartite region regulatory and law enforcement agents from the 25 participating member states. Now, joining me in studio with more on this is Mr. Lovemore Bingandadi, the project manager, Tripartite Transport and Transit. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Namibia this morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Okay. Now let's dig right into it. We know that SADC commemorated their 40th anniversary in 2021. Let's talk about some of the key achievements the region has made since 1980.
That's quite a mouthful. Since 1980, SADC has facilitated the integration of the region in various areas. I work under the Directorate of Infrastructure, where we coordinate member states' efforts on energy, ICT, transport, water, and meteorology. So just taking energy, for example, we have created the Southern African Power Pool that allows member states to trade and share power. Some member states produce more power than others. So the Southern African Power Pool has created a platform for trading of such power. In the area of transport, we have coordinated the development of the Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan, which identifies the transport infrastructure that is needed to facilitate increased trade between SADC members and also between SADC members and other African countries so that we can implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. Further, in ICT, a number of policies to harmonize our policies and regulations so that we can implement the fourth industrial revolution in our region has also been achieved. I'm just picking on areas under infrastructure, but we have similar achievements in agriculture and in trade, in forestry, in mining.
I'm sure there's a lot definitely to be celebrated over the last 40 years.
Yes,
let's talk about some of the challenges that are posed by a lack of, you mentioned that you work for the integration unit, but let's talk about what in your view and your expertise, what are the challenges perhaps that are posed by a lack of integration and a liberalized road transport market in both Eastern and Southern Africa? What are the challenges posed by that?
Thank you. So what we need, first of all, is consider as a scenario where a Namibian is exporting, say, fish from the port of Walvis Bay to DRC. He will have to have a vehicle and a driver, and they need to travel through Katimamlilo, Sesheke into Zambia and through Kasumbalesa between Zambia and DRC. At each of those border posts, you will find an average of 8 border regulatory authorities that are trying to monitor, regulate, and enforce different laws, regulations, and standards. What we found out in 2016 when we conducted a survey is that those laws, regulations, and policies that affect a driver, a vehicle, and his cargo when they travel cross-border are not harmonized. Secondly, we also found out that some member states still use manual systems as opposed to computer-based systems to carry out their border verification and transaction systems. And thirdly, we also found out that basic things such as driver's licenses in terms of the driving codes are also not harmonized. So those challenges cause delays, and I'm sure Namibians have seen on TV or on social media long queues at our border posts. So those are the challenges that lack of harmonization in road transport cause. The delays are translated into costs because when the driver and the vehicle and the load are sitting at the border, they are incurring costs. Those costs are then ultimately passed to the consumers. So we then find that the fish that originated from Walvis Bay, by the time it reaches DRC, it becomes very expensive to the consumer.
Delays, yes.
So we are no longer competitive on the regional and the global market.
Okay. Now let's talk about the fact that the Tripartite Transport and Transit Facilitation Program, FFP, that aims to implement, obviously, the Tripartite Free Trade Agreement and the African Continental Agreement, which you have also mentioned, by facilitating development of more competitive, integrated and liberalized national roads and transport market in the Tripartite region. Let's talk about how effective this program has been, highlighting some of the things. I think one of the progress that we can mention in Namibia is that our driving license is also incorporated the issue of SADC so that it can be recognized. But what are some of the opportunities that have come as a result of this integration?
Thank you. So what we did under the TFP were three key things. First, we developed two key agreements. The first one is the Vehicle Load Management Agreement to protect road infrastructure by ensuring that member states design and construct and maintain their roads to the same specifications. And I'm happy on this note to celebrate Namibia as being the country in Africa with the best roads. But those roads need to be protected by a network of way bridges or way stations and effective law enforcement. We require then to have harmonized policies and regulations for such protection so that the same way the roads are protected in Namibia is the same way that applies in Zambia and DRC, giving just the example of the Walvis Bay Ndola Lubumbashi corridor. So the Vehicle Load Management Agreement, I'm happy to say, has been adopted by member states. What now remains is for all member states to domesticate and convert that regional agreement into national law so that we've got the same processes, same standards in terms of axle load limits that are used for enforcement in all the three countries. A second and key achievement under TFP is to harmonize the laws and regulation and standards on vehicles, on drivers, and on loads. You have given the example of the driver's license. So there is an international ISO standard on how a driver's license, to ensure that it is not forged, should be designed and should be manufactured. So Namibia is one of the member states, including Zimbabwe and South Africa, that have now designed their driver's license to comply with the regional standard. We are working with other member states to achieve the same objective. Equally, the size, the length, the dimension, the height and width of vehicles on our roads, they need to conform to the same standards. So again, we have developed model laws to assist member states to achieve such a harmonization in terms of vehicle dimensions. We go further even to the basic process by which people acquire their driver's licenses, the way in which vehicles are annually inspected, it needs to be harmonized. Again, we've developed model laws that member states are now implementing. And then finally, the subject of our activity tomorrow, we have developed a system, computer-based system, national transport information systems that assist member states to collect information about drivers, about vehicles that they can share, so that if a Zimbabwean is stopped on a Namibian road and he produces a driver's license, that law enforcement officer using ICT should be able to verify the authenticity of that driver's license by accessing information on the original national information system where the license was issued. In our example, that would be Zimbabwe. Currently, if I produce my driver's license, a hard copy, The law enforcement officer by the roadside has got no way of knowing whether it's a fake or not, because
no
these days there are excellent fakes that are being produced.
Okay. Now, I think you have talked about the fact that Namibia is launching that the trips tomorrow and the corridor, the monitoring system, also what it entails. We also noted that, you know, there are some countries that participated, and we are also seeing that Namibia is responsible for the wider SADC trip system. But as we begin to conclude our conversation, let's talk to us about how this, as a part of the digitalization process of trade, commerce and transport transactions, regulations and law enforcement, CTS obviously will also be able to be an interface with systems other than transport and public health, such as integration, migration and customs. You know, how will this system work besides all these other things that will be connecting, and how did the 4 countries that participated in the pilot project, how have they benefited, and how would also be a benefit to all the other member states that have not actually participated in the pilot project?
Thank you. So the pilot project was implemented in 4 countries, Namibia, Zambia, Botswana and Zimbabwe. We wanted to demonstrate the effectiveness of the system. We worked with national transport operators. We worked with border authorities, customs, immigration, and public health. And the pilot was a success. We are now proceeding to roll out the system in other member states. Currently, we are working in Malawi and Mozambique. The benefits of the system is basically we are providing law enforcement agencies and border authorities with tools. There is Wi-Fi that is available to border agencies and operators at the border. So what happens in that example that we gave of Walvis Bay load going to DRC, the driver will upload information about his passport, information about the vehicle, information about the load that he's carrying. Once he uploads this information onto the system, it means our border officials at Katima Mulilo and Sesheke will have access to the information even before the driver departs Walvis Bay, and they can start to interrogate and evaluate and assess that system. And using risk-based systems, they can also identify which vehicles to inspect so that you don't stop all vehicles. That reduces the times at the border. So we have provided an effective tool to reduce the challenges of borders delays. But more importantly, ICT has this advantage that once you've loaded information onto a system, you are leaving a digital footprint. So if he stopped at a checkpoint and the law enforcement officer scans his driver's license or number plate, that information is captured and recorded. And even payment system where licenses and fees or fines are to be paid, we want that to be done electronically, which shines a light and reduces opportunities for corruption. Because when we do payments manually, there's no record.
There's no trace.
It cannot be traced. It cannot be audited. So this is one of the biggest advantages that member states are to derive from the corridor trip monitoring system. The trips that we are launching tomorrow is a switch. Just like I could have a bank account with FNB, but I can walk into Stanbic ATM and still be able to withdraw money. We are saying if the Namibian vehicle is stopped in Zambia, in Lusaka, by Lusaka law enforcement officers, they should scan the barcode on the driver's license or the car registration number and be able to verify information on the original database in Namibia. So that ability for member states to share securely information about drivers and vehicles is one of the biggest advantages that we've introduced through trips which Namibia is launching.
Okay. Now, well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we do hope we wish you a successful launch tomorrow, and we simply look forward to another aspect of integration which brings SADC and its 25 member states all together.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay. Now, that was Mr. Lovemore Bingandadi, who is a project manager, Tripartite Transport and Transit Facilitation Program under the SADC Secretariat, talking to us about the trips as well as the CTMS program and systems that will be launched tomorrow in the capital here in Windhoek.